The restaurant gleamed with opulence. Crystal chandeliers reflected the warm light across polished marble floors, and the scent of gourmet meals mingled with subtle hints of expensive perfumes. Security was tight. Guards patrolled discreetly. Cameras lined every corner, and even the staff moved with practiced precision. This was not just any restaurant. It was a place where the elite dined, where every detail mattered, and where mistakes could cost more than money. Tonight, however, the restaurant would host more than just wealth. It would host a problem that had left the best minds stumped, and a girl nobody expected to make a difference. Victor Kane, the young Mafia boss, entered with his usual calm authority. Tall, sharp-eyed, and impeccably dressed, he exuded control, a silent warning to anyone who dared misstep. His presence shifted the atmosphere instantly. Patrons instinctively straightened, whispers died down, and even the waitstaff moved with greater care. Victor's reputation preceded him. Failure or disrespect was not tolerated. Tonight, however, something more was at stake than his authority. It was survival. The problem had begun hours earlier. A critical security malfunction in one of the private dining rooms, a room where the most sensitive financial and personal conversations occurred, had caused an alert. 20 highly paid professionals were called in: engineers, hackers, security specialists, mechanics. They worked tirelessly, adjusting, recalibrating, and analyzing every system in sequence. Time passed, and each attempt failed. One by one, the experts shook their heads, muttering about impossible configurations, corrupted protocols, or unsafe pathways. The tension grew. Victor's gaze swept across the room intermittently. His face remained calm, but inside, he was measuring every second, every failed attempt. Each failure brought the risk closer, each miscalculation a step toward potential disaster. The restaurant owner fretted nervously, unsure how to intervene without further chaos. The guards whispered in corners. The right-hand man hovered near Victor, prepared to act at a moment's notice. The professionals grew frustrated, their expensive credentials unable to resolve the issue. A sense of dread hung over the room. Victor's eyes, piercing and focused, calculated the likelihood of catastrophe with surgical precision. To anyone watching, it seemed like the countdown of failure had already begun. Meanwhile, at the corner of the room, unnoticed, a young waitress named Alina moved silently. She had been serving tables for hours, carrying trays, observing the room with calm, intelligent eyes. Her age, just 20, belied the maturity in her demeanor. Her uniform was simple, her shoes scuffed, but her posture was confident, her expression attentive. She did not attempt to impress anyone. She did not seek recognition. Her mind was already working, quietly, analyzing patterns and discrepancies unnoticed by the trained experts around her. Victor observed her fleetingly, more out of habit than interest. She seemed small, unimportant, a server in a luxury world she did not belong to. Yet her eyes betrayed something. She noticed details, which systems the experts ignored, which sensors failed, which configurations were redundant. She did not move her hands, did not speak, did not interfere, but she saw everything. Time grew more critical. The professionals exhausted their options. Victor leaned back, his expression unreadable, but a faint line of tension crossed his forehead. Failure had been imminent. Guests whispered about the looming disaster, some joking nervously, others pale with fear. The room felt suspended, the air thick with anticipation, and then, as if breaking a spell, Alina stepped slightly forward. Her voice was soft, almost hesitant, yet filled with quiet authority. "May I try?" Her head turned. The 20 experts froze. The restaurant owner blinked. The guards shifted uncomfortably. Victor's gaze, calm for hours, sharpened instantly. The simple words carried a weight none expected. For a moment, the room was silent. The problem, unsolved for hours, had drawn attention to someone who everyone had dismissed. The professionals glanced at each other incredulously. "Who is she?" one whispered. "She's a waitress," another said, disbelief lacing his tone. Victor leaned forward, his expression unchanged, but his mind was already calculating. Something in her tone, her calmness, her quiet focus, suggested she saw what they could not. Alina didn't speak further. She simply approached the system. Her eyes scanned the panels, the wiring, the controls. Her movements were subtle, deliberate, and precise. She bent slightly, adjusted a sequence, entered a configuration, and within seconds, a beep, the alarm stopped. Lights returned to normal. Systems reset. Problem solved. The room erupted into stunned silence. 20 experts stared in disbelief. The restaurant owner froze. Guards exchanged glances. Victor Kane, the man who rarely betrayed emotion, remained still for a moment. Then he slowly exhaled. He had just witnessed the impossible. The problem that had defeated the best, the brightest, the most expensive minds in the city had been solved in mere seconds by a single waitress who had been observing quietly all along. Victor's eyes met hers. He saw intelligence, composure, and courage, not the loud kind that demands attention, but the quiet, unassuming kind that changes outcomes. And in that instant, the question formed in his mind: how did she know? The room remained tense. Everyone waited for recognition, for applause, for reaction. But Alina merely stepped back, quiet, observing the stunned professionals around her. Her gaze briefly met Victor's. A silent understanding passed. This girl was not ordinary. She was exceptional, and the story had only just begun. Victor Kane leaned back slightly, his piercing gaze still fixed on the young waitress who had just solved a problem that had defeated 20 of his most highly paid experts. The room remained silent, as if the world itself paused to acknowledge the impossible feat. The professionals who had been struggling for hours now stared at Alina in disbelief, mouths slightly open, pride wounded and confidence shattered. The restaurant owner, who had been nervously hovering nearby, blinked rapidly, trying to process the scene unfolding in front of him. Guards straightened, sensing the shift in authority and the electric tension in the air. Adrian Malhotra, calm yet intensely observant, broke the silence. "You solved it in seconds," he said quietly, his voice barely audible over the faint hum of the restored systems. "How?" Alina didn't look intimidated. She only adjusted her apron and shrugged gently, her calm, intelligent eyes reflecting confidence without arrogance. "I just observed," she said softly. "I noticed what everyone else overlooked." A murmur of disbelief rippled through the experts. One of the engineers stepped forward, incredulous. "You mean to say you didn't even touch the main panel? You just saw it?" Alina nodded slightly. "Patterns, sequences, the logic was already there. I just connected the dots." Victor's eyes narrowed as he studied her carefully. Something about the way she worked, the instant understanding, the precision, was more than just talent. It was knowledge that only insiders or someone trained by the right hands could possess. He had seen genius before, yes, but this was different. It was instinctive, yet perfectly informed. It was as if she knew the system by heart, without ever being told, without credentials, without formal education. Daniel, Victor's right-hand man, leaned in. "Boss, she shouldn't know this. None of us explained it. None of the 20 experts had any success." Victor remained silent for a few seconds, his mind calculating every possibility. Then he spoke. "Exactly," he said quietly, "and that is what makes her remarkable." The professionals muttered among themselves, some defensive, others embarrassed. They had been confident in their skills, their experience, and their paychecks, yet none had succeeded. Now, a single waitress, working quietly in the corner, had rendered their collective expertise irrelevant. Pride and ego collided with reality, and the room itself seemed to acknowledge the shift. Alina's gaze never wavered. She didn't smile, didn't boast, didn't seek recognition. She simply observed Victor, the man in control, noting the subtle shift in his demeanor. His focus was different now, sharper, more analytical. He didn't just see a waitress. He saw someone whose mind operated differently, whose intelligence functioned without the need for validation or reward, and that intrigued him. Victor finally stood, his presence instantly commanding every attention in the room. "Show me again," he said calmly. "Step through what you did." Alina nodded, stepping closer to the system. She pointed out sequences, adjustments, and connections that the experts had overlooked, explaining her thought process concisely and efficiently. She did not boast, did not dramatize. She simply described the logic that had allowed her to solve the problem in mere seconds. The experts leaned in, reluctantly listening, their expressions shifting from disbelief to cautious acknowledgement. Victor's lips tightened as he absorbed every word. He could see that her understanding went beyond mere observation. It was practical, it was methodical, it was natural problem-solving that did not require authority, ego, or external validation. He realized, with a subtle tightening in his chest, that she possessed knowledge that should not have been possible for someone like her. For a brief moment, the room was quiet again. Victor's eyes never left Alina. Where did you learn this?" he asked quietly, the tone controlled but sharp. Alina hesitated for a split second, then shook her head slightly. "I just pay attention. I observe. My family, we had to figure things out on our own," she said softly, her eyes reflecting the quiet struggles of her life. "Nothing fancy, no schools, no formal training." Victor remained silent, processing her words. The subtle hint of pride, intelligence, and instinctive problem-solving struck him deeply. This girl, barely 20 years old, had outperformed experts, solved what should have been impossible, and done so without seeking recognition. Daniel whispered to Victor, "Boss, notice the method she used. It's exactly what insider technicians would know. Only trained staff or someone with inside knowledge could have executed it like that." Victor's jaw tightened. He hadn't expected this. Not a single moment of hesitation, not a flaw in logic, not a false move. Every action, every observation, every conclusion she had reached had been executed with the precision of someone who knew the system intimately. And yet, how could a poor waitress, unknown, untrained, have such insight? Victor's eyes narrowed. A question formed in his mind, one he had to know. Where had she learned this? He could feel the weight of the mystery pressing down. The room, the experts, even the restaurant owner, all faded into background noise. His attention was entirely on Alina, the girl who had done the impossible. "Tell me," Victor said finally, his voice calm, controlled, but laced with curiosity and command. Alina looked up, unaware of the intensity of his gaze. "Tell you what?" she asked quietly. Victor paused, studying her expression. Her calm, collected demeanor made him think, made him calculate, made him realize that there was more to her than met the eye. "How you knew what to do," he said. "How you executed this flawlessly, in seconds, when 20 trained professionals failed." Alina hesitated, glancing down at the system again. I don't know," she whispered. "I just saw the patterns. I paid attention. I thought if someone didn't fix it, people could get hurt." Victor's expression softened slightly, though he didn't relax. He realized that the girl's motivation was pure, rooted not in ambition or greed, but in empathy and instinct. That alone made her remarkable. Daniel nudged him subtly. "Boss, she knows things she shouldn't. This isn't just luck. Someone else, someone connected to her past, maybe taught her this." Victor's mind raced. The question that had been quietly forming now demanded an answer. The waitress had not only solved the impossible, she had done it in a way that implied insider knowledge. And that question, where did she get that knowledge? The answer could change everything. Victor leaned back, observing her silently, letting the room absorb the tension. The professionals shifted uncomfortably, unable to comprehend how a simple waitress had outperformed their expertise. Alina stepped back slightly, still calm, still observant, unaware that she had just triggered the curiosity and suspicion of one of the most powerful men in the city. And in that moment, the real mystery began. Not how she solved the problem, but how a young girl, with no credentials and no experience, knew exactly what to do. Victor's eyes remained fixed on her, and the room, the experts, the luxury, the equipment, all faded away. Because in his world, someone like her was not supposed to exist. Victor Kane sat quietly in his private office after the incident in the restaurant. The way Alina had solved a problem that 20 trained professionals had failed in mere seconds was still replaying in his mind. His gaze lingered on the monitors, showing her calm, precise movements. Something about the method she used was familiar, like a pattern he had seen once in his life but could not place. He tapped a finger against the polished mahogany desk, thinking carefully. If her knowledge was natural intuition, then why had it been executed with such exactness that even his best experts had failed to notice it? The thought nagged at him, demanding investigation. He turned to Daniel, his trusted aide, whose eyes mirrored both curiosity and caution. "Pull her files," Victor said quietly. "Every record we can find. Background, education, family, anything. I want to know how a girl like her could know what she did." Daniel nodded, his hands moving swiftly across the keyboard. "Boss, her public records are clean. No criminal activity, no specialized education, no military training, no professional background in mechanics or engineering." Victor frowned slightly, his mind racing. That only made the mystery greater. How could a girl from such a humble background, working as a waitress for survival, execute a method that only insiders with high-level training could perform? He leaned back, his fingers steepled in thought. Something in this girl's past had to explain her knowledge. The investigation deepened. Digital archives, school records, and old municipal files were checked. Each lead produced nothing unusual, and yet Victor could feel that the answer was there, hidden, waiting. He decided to expand the search into older, private records. Daniel hesitated for a moment. "Boss, this is unusual territory. We're digging into archives from years ago, old cases, retired personnel." Victor's eyes were sharp. "Exactly. That is where the answer is." Hours passed. Files were cross-referenced, images scanned, logs examined. Then, in a pile of old photographs from city events 15 years ago, a figure caught Victor's eye. It was a younger man, wearing a security uniform, standing protectively over a small boy. The resemblance was unmistakable. The boy was none other than young Adrian Cole, and the man's posture, his focus, his unwavering attention, told a story of dedication and sacrifice. Victor leaned closer, tracing the man's features. A realization struck him. The surname on Alina's resume matched the man's exactly. He pulled out a small, worn notebook found in a related archive. Inside, the handwriting matched the security protocols and observational techniques that Alina had displayed in the restaurant. It contained schematics, problem-solving methods, and observational exercises, something taught personally to a child by a mentor long ago. Victor's jaw tightened as he made the connection. Alina's father, or perhaps her guardian, had been the man who had protected him, or someone close to him in a crisis years ago. The very techniques she had used, instinctively, to solve the restaurant problem were taught in that notebook. A deep silence filled the office. Victor stared at the files, absorbing the implications. The girl who had solved the impossible was not just clever by chance. She had been trained in ways no one in the present even suspected. The knowledge had been dormant, untapped, and yet perfectly retained. It explained everything. Her precision, her confidence, her ability to act decisively under pressure. It all made sense now. Daniel noticed the shift in Victor's demeanor. "Boss, you've found something." Victor didn't respond immediately. He leaned back, eyes narrowing at the photograph once more. "It's more than something," he said slowly. "It's someone connected to a sacrifice that shaped everything I am today." His thoughts went back 15 years, the kidnapping attempt, the chaos, the loyal bodyguard who had given everything to protect Adrian, risking his life so that the young boy could survive. And now, years later, the daughter of that very protector stood in front of him, completely unaware of the significance of her own abilities. Victor's mind raced. How many people had gone through life unaware of the impact their parents had made? How many had carried knowledge without knowing its full power? And now, this girl, Alina, was the one who had solved the impossible problem in seconds, using knowledge that had been hidden in plain sight all along. He pressed his hand to his forehead briefly, trying to absorb the enormity of the connection. The realization dawned fully. Alina was the child of the man who had sacrificed everything to protect his life. She had unknowingly inherited not only his courage, but also his training in observation and problem-solving. And that explained why a simple waitress, working quietly in a corner, could outperform 20 highly paid professionals. Victor's lips pressed together. He realized that not only had she displayed extraordinary intelligence and instinct, but she had also honored a legacy she didn't even know existed. His respect for her grew instantly, tempered by the urgent need to protect her. He turned to Daniel. "Prepare discreet surveillance," he said. "I need to know if anyone is watching her, and keep her close. This knowledge she possesses, it makes her valuable to more than just me." Daniel nodded immediately, understanding the gravity. Victor's mind already calculated the potential risks: rival Mafia connections, corporate spies, anyone who might exploit the knowledge Alina now unknowingly carried. The office fell silent once again. Victor stared at the photograph and notebook. His expression softened slightly, not emotionally sentimental, but reverently respectful. He had uncovered the truth. The girl who had solved the impossible was part of a legacy he could never ignore. And the question remained, would she realize the full extent of her own capabilities before it was too late? The suspense hung in the air, thick as smoke, as Victor prepared for the next step, because knowing her past was only the beginning. The real test was what would happen when the threats, the secrets, and the rival connections surfaced. And Victor knew one thing for certain: Alina's life and the world around her would never be the same again. Years ago, long before the restaurant incident, Alina's life had been shaped quietly in the shadows of a small workshop. Her father, a skilled security designer and technician, had taught her more than just basic problem-solving. He had trained her to observe, analyze, and act under pressure, imparting lessons that combined intuition with logic. Each exercise, each challenge, each careful observation was meant to prepare her for emergencies, but no one knew that her training would ever be tested in a high-stakes environment like a Mafia-controlled empire. Alina remembered those evenings clearly, her father guiding her hands, correcting her approach, teaching her to anticipate outcomes before they appeared, instilling patience, composure, and calm intelligence in a world that often demanded panic. These lessons became second nature to her, though she never realized the full extent of their power or how vital they would become years later. Back in the present, Victor Kane studied Alina closely after the astonishing feat in the restaurant. He understood now why she had solved the impossible so quickly, why her instincts were flawless, and why every subtle adjustment she made aligned perfectly with principles that only insiders, trained at the highest level, could understand. The realization struck him: she was not just intelligent by chance. She had been trained long ago in skills that had never been applied until now, and yet she had applied them flawlessly, without pride, without expectation, and without seeking attention. Suddenly, alarms blared faintly in the background. Victor's sharp eyes immediately scanned the monitors. "External intrusion detected," Daniel whispered. "Movement outside the perimeter." Victor's jaw tightened. This was not a random act, it was deliberate. Someone had discovered Alina's presence and the knowledge she now possessed. Outside the restaurant, hidden vehicles adjusted their positions. Rival Mafia operatives had been tracking Victor's movements for weeks, hoping to exploit any vulnerability. The girl who had solved the impossible had unknowingly drawn attention from dangerous eyes. Victor knew the stakes instantly. Her knowledge made her a target. Every subtle skill, every instinctive calculation she had used in seconds to solve the complex problem now painted a bullseye on her back. Alina remained calm. She adjusted a few loose items on the table, her hand steady despite the tension she could feel. Her eyes scanned the environment naturally, as if she had been trained to anticipate threats and read situations carefully. Victor observed silently, impressed not just by her abilities, but by her composure. She had learned to act decisively without showing fear, exactly as a professional would. But she was only a 20-year-old waitress. Daniel whispered, "Boss, this is escalating." "They're converging on the building." Victor nodded slowly. "Prepare interior defenses. I want every angle monitored. But let her continue. She's the key to navigating this situation." Alina noticed a subtle shift in the pattern of the rival vehicles outside. She adjusted the placement of a chair near the table, slightly moved a decorative partition, and even shifted a tray of dishes without touching the monitors. The result was immediate. The pressure points of potential intrusion were subtly disrupted. Daniel blinked, impressed. Victor's expression tightened. "Exactly," he muttered. "She understands what even trained professionals overlook." A sudden flashback hit Victor as he observed her in action. Years ago, he had been saved during a corporate siege by a loyal bodyguard, a man who had given his life to protect Victor from assassins hired by rival families. That bodyguard's methods, calculated, anticipatory, precise, were the same principles Alina had used instinctively in the restaurant. Recognition struck him like lightning. Her father had been that man's protégé or student. The timing, the intuition, the problem-solving skills, all connected. She wasn't just lucky. She had inherited knowledge from someone deeply intertwined with Victor's life, someone whose life had once saved his own. Before he could process further, the alarms intensified. The rival Mafia had started their attack. Vehicles rammed into the perimeter. Silencers, masked figures, and shadowy silhouettes began pressing against the secure entry points. Victor's guards immediately took defensive positions. Doors locked, cameras shifted, systems activated. But it was clear, the threat was coordinated, sophisticated, and deadly. Alina didn't panic. She adjusted the environment around Ethan's table with calm precision, subtly moving items to act as protective barriers, guiding the staff and patrons toward safe positions without revealing panic. Every step was natural, efficient, and protective. Victor's respect for her grew instantly. He realized that she had not only solved a technical problem in seconds, but now she was instinctively applying those same skills under life-threatening circumstances. The restaurant owner peeked nervously from the back, realizing, for the first time, that the young waitress had just become the most critical person in the building. The professionals who had failed moments ago looked on in awe, realizing she had not only solved a problem, but had also instinctively read the entire environment, identifying hazards and potential breaches that even their experience could not anticipate. Victor stepped forward slightly, motioning to Daniel. "Keep monitoring, but do not interfere unless necessary," he said. "She must guide this first. Let's see what she is capable of under real pressure." Maya's hands were steady. Her eyes scanned the chaos without fear. She whispered instructions to nearby staff, guiding them to safety, subtly manipulating the environment to neutralize threats, and in mere moments, a tactical advantage emerged. The rival attack was partially disrupted, not by brute force, but by careful observation, insight, and rapid decision-making. Victor's gaze softened slightly as he watched. A rare smile touched his lips, not amusement, but deep admiration. He had witnessed competence and courage before, yes, but never this level of instinctive mastery executed with calm confidence. The girl before him was extraordinary. As the rival agents re-evaluated their approach, hesitant from the unexpected countermeasures, Victor made a silent decision. He would not only protect her, but he would ensure she had recognition and respect, not because of money, not because of influence, but because she had earned it. And in that precise moment, Victor knew this was the turning point. The girl, who had once quietly observed from the corner, had now become indispensable. She was not just a problem solver. She was the protector, the strategist, and the one who commanded respect through action alone. The scene froze for a moment in Victor's mind, the calm waitress amidst chaos, moving with efficiency and intelligence far beyond her age and experience. Every trained professional had failed. Every expert had been stunned. And now, the young woman who had been underestimated had taken control of a situation that could have been disastrous, and Victor, The cold, disciplined Mafia boss felt something unfamiliar stirring in him. Respect. Real, undeniable, earned respect. He allowed himself a rare thought. Perhaps this girl's instincts and heritage held secrets he would soon uncover, knowledge that could change everything. The attack continued outside, but inside the restaurant, a quiet order emerged, guided by Alina, and Victor knew, with certainty, that the moment she had whispered, "May I try?" had changed the course of events forever. The restaurant was finally calm. The rival attack had been neutralized, largely thanks to Alina's quick thinking, observation, and natural problem-solving skills. Victor Kane stood near the entrance, his sharp gaze following her every move, though there was something softer now in his eyes, a rare acknowledgement of respect. The room, once tense and chaotic, seemed to breathe again. The professionals who had failed moments ago watched silently, humbled, realizing that intelligence and courage were not tied to paychecks or titles. Alina moved quietly between tables, ensuring that the elderly patrons were safe and the staff uninjured. She did not boast. She did not seek recognition. Her focus was entirely on the people around her. Victor stepped closer, his presence calm but commanding, and spoke softly. "You didn't just fix the problem, you protected everyone." Alina shook her head slightly. "I wasn't trying to impress anyone," she said quietly. "I only didn't want innocent people to get hurt." Victor nodded, a subtle smile forming. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a thick envelope of money, offering it to her as gratitude for her courage and skill. She shook her head, refusing. "I didn't do it for money," she said firmly. "I did it because it was the right thing to do." The room fell silent again. Even the restaurant owner, emotional from witnessing the entire ordeal, looked at her with admiration. Victor's respect for her deepened further. He realized that this young waitress, barely 20, had displayed a level of courage, intelligence, and integrity he had rarely seen in anyone, no matter their wealth, experience, or training. Later that evening, Victor privately accessed the archives regarding Alina's past. He discovered photographs, old notebooks, and subtle annotations that connected her to a long-forgotten mentor, her father, a skilled technician and problem-solving expert who had trained her in observation, logic, and practical intelligence years before. It was then Victor realized how she had instinctively solved the problem in seconds, using knowledge that only someone trained intimately would know. The connection to her father explained everything: the calmness under pressure, the precision, the uncanny timing. The next day, Victor convened a private meeting with the restaurant owner and staff. "This young woman," he began, his voice calm but firm, "has demonstrated the kind of intelligence, courage, and responsibility that cannot be taught. Her actions today saved lives and prevented disaster." He announced the creation of a foundation in her father's name, the Guardian Scholarship Program, designed to provide education, training, and support for children of security personnel, janitors, and low-income workers. Alina was appointed as the head of the foundation, overseeing programs, visiting families, and ensuring opportunities reached those who needed them most. Months later, at the opening event of the foundation, the restaurant staff, Alina's colleagues, and the elderly patrons gathered on stage. Victor watched her interact with the children, guiding them, smiling, and inspiring them through her story. He stepped closer and said softly, "You changed my restaurant, saved lives, and reminded me what real courage looks like." Alina smiled faintly, holding her son's hand, feeling the weight of both gratitude and humility. Arav, her little boy, looked up at Victor and said innocently, "Mum says heroes don't wear suits, but I think sometimes they do." Victor chuckled, looking at both mother and son, his gaze filled with warmth. "Your father saved my life. Now it's my turn to protect yours," he said. The audience applauded. Professionals remained silent, humbled. Rich patrons and former skeptics looked on, realizing that respect is earned through courage, empathy, and action, not wealth or position. Alina, quietly standing with her son, had transformed a moment of chaos into an enduring legacy. She had solved the impossible, earned the respect of one of the most powerful men in the city, and created a foundation that would help countless others for years to come. The camera panned out, capturing the smiles, the gratitude, and the subtle bond forming between Victor and Alina. Not romance, not wealth, but mutual respect, admiration, and the quiet recognition of shared values. The screen faded to black. The end.